Okay, let's begin with the word of prayer. The dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful. So grateful for the opportunity to study your word, to learn of you. We have a great burden upon our hearts, Lord, for this message, not in the abstract sense, but because of the people that are attached to it and the people who need to hear it. We know, Lord, that we are to seek and save the lost, that we are to participate in the work of the salvation of sinners, and that we are to cooperate with Christ in the work that he is doing and seeking to do in our lives. So we give our hearts to you this morning. We ask for your Holy Spirit to guide and direct our minds, and that we can continue to understand the implications of this message. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, good morning, everyone. Now, yesterday morning, what exactly did we study? Does anybody remember?
Very little.
You remember very little, or we studied very little?
Yeah, we didn't really study too much in Revelation 9, just touched on it, and then kind of went on to looking how our movement aligns with Millerite movement and the applications that we should be making.
Right. So one of the things we addressed was the placing of 9/11. I mean, that was, I think, the main point, if I'm going to remember correctly, mostly because I just looked behind me at what I wrote on the board. But in readjusting these lines, or in looking at how Jeff was moving the waymark, so to speak, as light unfolded from Millerite history, we can see that work is still going on, and that where we place 9/11 in these lines depends on which line we are in. Now, a lot of this yesterday was sort of in a response to Chris Smith, who had this question regarding about 9/11, because we can see that 9/11 isn't on the big line, except in the fact that it's connected to the mighty angel of Revelation 18, and that Ellen White sees the mighty angel of Revelation 18 in connection with the Sunday law, swelling to a loud cry. But we now understand, and I think it's pretty clear, at least to me, hopefully it's clear to everyone else, that 9/11 is part of the Sunday law. Because in Jeff's description of this, and I'm going to go to his notebook 3. Let's go over there. Because in Jeff's description of this modern radical Islam coming in, it's in connection with the Sunday law of the United States. So prior to 9/11, Jeff sees this event, and really it is 9/11, but he sees it as part of the Sunday law. So when he says Islam, a power from the bottomless pit, sudden and violent in nature, after a prolonged war between atheism and Catholicism, Islam begins its warfare again. This is the fulfillment of the prophecy of Ishmael, which we know from Genesis 16, verse 11 and 12. Modern radical Islam will torment and hurt the beast that was, USA, through sudden and violent actions, with the emphasis on modern gunpowder. It will also hurt and torment the beast that is, which at this point is coming together into the threefold union of modern Babylon, the beast, the dragon, and the false prophet, the United Nations, the New World Order. The circumstances created by radical Islam will provide the environment politically, economically, socially, and religiously to pass a law, a Sunday law in the USA. At this point, the sealing of God's people begins. So we know that we mark at 9/11 that this is what do we mark at 9/11? What does it mean, rather than me telling you? What does 9/11 mark?
The beginning of the sealing of God's people.
The beginning of the sealing of God's people. So prior to 9/11, Jeff is going to look at radical Islam coming with sudden and violent actions against the United States. And that's going to begin the sealing of God's people. And yet Jeff doesn't recognize it when it happens. It takes him about 2.5 years, I guess, to come to that understanding. Now, do we change that position? Do we still hold that 9/11 has that role? It's also the point in which the judgment of the living begins. Do we still hold to that view?
Yes.
Yes, and we would have to, because if we didn't, that would be, in my view anyway, a rejection of the light that God has given us. Because prior to the event, Jeff sees it in a particular way, and those attributes that he attaches to this future event are later placed on that event. Now, some people have tried to move that, but we can see, in a sense, we can even go back to 1989 and see that all of this leads to the Sunday law. Now, when we go to the whiteboard here, let me take a look again at what I wrote up there yesterday. Oh, probably not getting good sound. I don't have my camera pointing. You can probably hear me better now too, right?
Oh, you're worse?
I'm worse? Well, that's odd. How about now? Better or worse? Yeah, I need to have a better setup than this. But anyway, let's go to change the cameras here. Yeah, I'm probably worse because the camera is behind me. I probably sound pretty good now, though.
Yes.
Okay, so when we look at this whiteboard, what we had drawn yesterday, part of the thing that I focused upon was that we're fulfilling this history of Samuel Snow's letters, and that we're in this period of 3 days that precedes midnight, and that 3 days could be represented by these 3 dates, or maybe even July 18th, March 27th, and December 25th, however one wants to see it. And that one of the things that we talked about in connection with December 25th, that this was the end of this line, and sometimes we attach the symbol of the Sunday law to it, even though it's a Saturday, it's a Sabbath, it's not Sunday yet. But that's the point after that time where a Sunday law could come, maybe even December 26th. That was sort of a suggestion way back. But the point was that the Sunday law couldn't come before then, that there is a work that needs to be done in our line. And we've looked at the symbol of this 20th day of the 9th month, and we see that it has a lot attached to it. The symbol of December 25th has lots attached to it. And that's the end of our line. Now, if we can take this, does this 777 days represent this period of time from November 9th, 1989 to the Sunday Law? Does November 9th, 2019 line up with November 9th, 1989?
Well, they're both, I think raffia.
Well, November 9th, 1989, is that raffia?
I thought internally, externally.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it raffia, but definitely we can say November 9th, 2019 is connected to November 9th, 1989 by that period of 30 years. And we know that if we go to 2019 and we go to November 9th, 1989, this is a period of 30 years. And at the beginning of this period, to December 25th, 1991, we have 777 days. And this is the fall of the Berlin Wall. You need to turn off your microphone. It's too loud. That's okay. Jeff, thanks. And this marks the fall of the Soviet Union proper, right? So these are connected. And so is there a connection between this history and this history?
Yes, we have applied the 30 years to the priesthood.
Yeah. Now, as far as this date here, I mean, Stephen has addressed it, but we've never really, at least I don't think that we have looked at the symbolism of the fall of the Soviet Union and connected it to this symbol here. So what does December 25th, 2021 represent?
Well, the date has connections to the sun as a worship.
Okay, connection to sun worship, which is one of the reasons why we'd say, you know, the symbol of the Sunday law is there. Okay. We weren't saying that a Sunday law is going to happen on December 25th, 2021, as many people have tried to argue, because we were just talking symbolically, not literally the Sunday law was going to occur. So who is the Soviet Union?
King of the South.
And who's the United States?
It's the armies of the King of the North.
Yeah. So can we say that there's some connection here between the King of the South and here the King of the North? You understand what I'm advocating? You really can't see that, but let's go with this. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Sort of, you're trying to maybe get to the fall of the Soviet Union, connecting up with the fall of the United States.
Yeah. And can we say that the United States is in the process of falling now?
Yes, I think we're watching it fall.
Most definitely.
Yeah, we're watching it fall. I mean, and we could go back. I mean, I like the date December 6th, the siege of Washington, but that's
January.
not it. What's that?
January 6th.
Yeah, January 6th, pardon me. What did I say, December 6th?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so January 6th. Now, December 6th, of course, is connected with our movement. So January 6th, 2021. And so we're going to see at the end of 2021, we can see that a lot is happening. Now, we're not particularly looking for an external event with December 25th. That is, we don't really know what it means. We do know that this is, for our movement, a significant date because it ends our line. Now, we do have some dates that we can place after that, at least in a symbolic way, that connect with the dates in this history. But again, we don't know if that means that something is going to happen on those dates or they're just part of a structure, because not every date in a structure has to have an event. So we're coming towards this date. We're not sure what it is, but we know that it's important for this movement. And we can see that even in this movement at the present time, we're moving towards this date in a way that we don't want to be. That is, we want to be united. And instead, what we see is division. And, some are suggesting that, I'm the cause of that division. And if that's true, we need to know it. I mean, if there's something that I'm doing that's causing division, I need to know it and I need to change it. But I would think that the division that exists is something more inside of each one of us. It's not something that we can blame on someone else. And that we have to take a long, hard look at ourselves. And then the purpose of this, because when we're talking about 9/11 here, because this is what we're talking about, 9/11 is connected to this whole history. And in order for our movement to understand who we are, when we are, we need to understand 9/11. And we need to know what July 18th means in relationship to 9/11. Now, one of the things I want to look at was brought up at the end of the study yesterday. Now, I meant to take more time to look into it, but we're going to talk about it a bit. So do you remember of what Christian brought up at the end of the study?
Help me and refresh my mind. What are you referring to?
Okay, Christian, do you remember what you brought up?
It was about the 1941.
Okay, 1941, September 11th, 1941. And what is that date?
We can say it is the beginning of the Second World War.
Yeah.
We can place it at that point.
Okay, so we say it's the beginning of the Second World War, in that it becomes a world war, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna.
Okay, so as a historian, I'm aware that the World War II began in Europe in 1939.
Yeah.
The involvement of America officially began after December 7th, 1941.
Yes, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Right, the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, the attack on Pearl Harbor. So now prior to that, America had engaged Japan in a war in the Pacific.
But America had not been involved in the war in Europe.
Right.
On 9/11, 1941, America practically gets involved in the war in Europe because President Roosevelt orders American ships to fire on German and Italian ships. So this is what happens on 9/11, 1941. So that's practically the start of the American involvement in the war. Okay,
Okay.
Pearl Harbor attack, it will happen a couple of months later in December, but we can place, I think, the beginning of the Second World War as a world conflict in 1941, in September 11th, 1941.
Okay. Now, do you have information on that date? Where would we find that information, Christian?
So it's pretty simple. It's an order given by President Roosevelt. Yeah, I could find it just by doing a Google search. I sent you the link yesterday, but I can find it again today.
Are you referring to his fireside chat on September 11, 1941 regarding the Greer incident?
Yes, that one.
Okay. Fireside chat. So that's what it is. Okay. So exactly what is said in that fireside chat?
Apparently, a German submarine fired upon the American destroyer, the Greer, near Iceland.
Okay, I'm reading it right now. Go on.
So Roosevelt used this to argue that there needed to be more involvement in this war.
Okay.
So this situation apparently became more where Roosevelt ordered escorts to protect Lend-Lease convoys, the ships and materials that we were sending to Great Britain, and that they were to shoot German submarines on sight.
Okay. So that's kind of an involvement in the war, but
Okay.
indirect.
Very much.
Okay.
It's not an official involvement, because in order for America to become involved in a war, the president needs to seek the approval of Congress in order to do it.
Yeah. Now, would this have led to Japan's attacking Pearl Harbor because of the Americans' involvement in the Pacific? Like,
I don't know that it would have led to that. I believe that the situation with Japan was more escalated than many wish to really address.
okay, so in some ways, maybe there was an undercurrent regarding this, what was happening there, that it was actions taken to get America more involved in the war.
Right.
But
That
that's
being
not,
opinion.
but that's not official. That's just the way it could be understood, that it was something
Right.
behind the scenes. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it is 1,335 days to the end of the war.
Okay, now let's also be clear.
Yeah.
This speech on September 11th,
Mhm.
sorry, was in response to the action that was taken on September 4th.
Okay.
So the issue with the Greer, the destroyer Greer, occurred on September 4th,
Okay.
not on September 11th. This is just the announcement.
Right. The announcement. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it is still interesting, especially when I look at the history connected with Hiroshima. So, which is what I want to look at today, and the connection that we had between July 18th and Nashville, right? So we're going to look at that. Now, I'm not going to draw it out because I have a nice chart and it would be really messy if I drew this out. So we're going to just look at this. Now, there is a couple of links there. Christian put a link that we can look at as well when we get into this. Now, so when you look at this chart here, I mean, I don't have Pearl Harbor included in this, I don't think. I didn't put it in this one. But this is a chart that goes back to Josiah Litch's prophecy. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so we can see things a bit better. Not that much. Okay. Now we can see here, we got the 150 years from August 3rd of the Gregorian calendar, July 27th of the Julian calendar in 1299. And we have here marked the 26th day of the 4th month, which is the biblical calendar, and the 26th day of the 10th month on the Islamic calendar. That's in the year 698, the year of the Hijra. Now, you're going to have this 150 years, and we mark, if we're taking the biblical date, the 26th day of the 4th month, July 18th Gregorian, or July 18th Julian, and July 27th Gregorian, both in 1449. And then the 360 years, which we looked at in detail, going to these Julian dates, and then the Gregorian date of July 27th, being marked with the 26th day of the 4th month. And then the 15 days, which brings us to August 11th, 1840. So that's the prophecy of Josiah Litch. I'm just going to zoom in a bit less. Okay. So people can see this quite well. So this part of the prophecy we have connected with events in Hiroshima. So one of the things we'll see here is that the bombing of Hiroshima is on August 6th, 1945 at 8:15 a.m., 8:15 being a symbol of the midnight cry. And it's the 26th day of the 4th month on the biblical calendar. Now, it's 646 years between 1299 and 1945. The interesting thing about this is it's also a period of 34 metonic cycles, and it's 666 lunar years, though not exactly to the month. Now, what would be the significance of this, attaching this symbol, 666 years, between July 27th, 1299 and August 6th, 1945? It's just 2 months short of 666 lunar years, by the way. So if it was the 26th day of the 10th month in the year 364 of the Hijra, then it would have been exactly 666 lunar years, but it is 646 biblical years to the day. And it's 34 metonic cycles, 19 times 34 years is 646. So is there significance by attaching this symbol of 666?
Could it be that this is symbolizing the close of probation for man?
Okay, well, the main thing I think about 666, I mean, if we go back to Miller's use of 666, what is he connecting with the 666 years?
Rome,
Next,
Rome pagan and Rome papal, correct?
right.
So it's a connecting of something, but it's also a symbol of satanic power, because we can connect Rome to Babylon by the 666 years
from the fulfillment of the third 7 times in Leviticus 26, which is the siege of Jerusalem by Babylon, which occurs 666 years before the siege of Jerusalem by Rome. That's described in Deuteronomy 28. So we can see that 666 is passing upon, it's this mystical number that's passing upon a satanic characteristic through these different nations. And is Islam a satanic power?
Yes.
Yeah, because it comes from the bottomless pit. And Muhammad is a star that falls from heaven. So we have these symbols of Islam. Now, Islam is also connected to the symbols that we have with Japan. What would be some similarities between the Japanese and Islam?
Well, their attacks, their attacks is one thing.
Okay, so suicide bombers.
Yeah,
Kamikazes. Yeah. Okay. Now, what about the symbol of the East?
Yeah, Japan has the rising sun
Yeah,
as a symbol.
yeah. So it has the symbol of the rising sun. That's the Japanese symbol.
Actual name of Japan is Nippon
Yeah, Nepal.
in Japanese. So that actually means the rising sun.
Mhm.
So the sun rises from the.
Yeah. Right. And so we know that there's this symbol of the East that's connected to the two. Now, I mean, there's a lot of differences as well, but we can look at some of these similarities and say that there's some connection here. Now, when we're dealing with Islam, I mean, Islam is not making an attack at Hiroshima. That's the United States making an attack. And it would almost, in a sense, as a symbol, be an attack upon Islam. Now, but if we go back, why did the attack on Hiroshima occur? Why did the Americans attack Japan?
Well, Japan attacked America first.
Okay, so Japan attacked America first on December 7th, 1941. So the attack on Pearl Harbor, as it's called.
The
Okay.
attack on Hiroshima was more because the American military viewed that there would be a protracted war if American troops were to invade on the Japanese mainland.
Right. Yeah. So they were looking at, they had this war with Japan. The Japanese are fierce fighters. In order to end the war, to bring a quick end with less American casualties, they had developed this atomic bomb, and they're going to drop it on Hiroshima and then Nagasaki. Now, we have some dates here, which we can look at in a little bit more detail. But let's go to another span of time. So when we go from August 7th, or August 6th, pardon me, 1945, and we count the number of days to July 18th, 2020, we have 3,910 weeks, which is 391 times 10, plus 5 days. Now, Stephen, I think you're the one that noticed this, right?
No, I think you did.
Oh, I did? Okay, maybe I did. But you also made another application. You could take different dates and use the same span of time connected with Hiroshima.
Yeah, the events surrounding the atomic tests.
Yeah.
Prior to that and so forth, there were connections to our time to 2020. There's a lot of, I can't remember exactly, and also the next date that they had for the atomic bomb after Japan had surrendered. They were planning to attack on August the 19th.
Yeah, so just look at this here. So this is the complete date or the complete chart of the dates connected with the attack on Japan. So we have Alamogordo, that's the first nuclear test. Now it happens on a date which we would call midnight. That is, it's the 5th day of the 4th month. It's July 16th, but it's the 5th day of the 4th month on the biblical calendar. And the interesting thing about this, when I watched a documentary on it, they actually had, it was an old documentary, but they had midnight, July 16th, which was kind of interesting just to see on that documentary that they put July 16th, they marked midnight the day before the test, that midnight before the test, and called it midnight, which we have the symbol of midnight on that date. And then there's the Potsdam Declaration, which is actually given on July 26th, but Japan receives it on July 27th. One is there ahead of us in time, ahead of the wherever Potsdam is. I think that's in Germany or someplace. I'm not sure where Potsdam was. But this declaration, they ended up rejecting. And they pretty much just kind of ignored it more than anything. But that's going to be on July 27th. And of course, that's a symbol that comes from Josiah Litch's prophecy. And then the date of Hiroshima itself, August 6th, is the 26th day of the 4th month on the biblical calendar. And of course, that's, again, that symbol that's connected with July 27th. And then Nagasaki on August 9th is the second attack. Now, this attack was originally planned for Kokura on August 11th. So August 11th is an obvious symbol from Josiah Litch's prophecy, as is the date, July 27th, Julian. So we have both the Julian and the Gregorian dates show up in this line. And these are the normal dates that people would give. These aren't like we picked and choose some dates. These are the dates. These are the events that are marked in history. But it's interesting that this attack was originally targeted for Kokura, but they moved it 2 days early. And they tried to first go to Kokura and bomb it, but then they had this secondary target of Nagasaki, which is what they chose on August 9th. Now, Japan surrenders August 15th. Now, there was a third plan that was slated for August 19th. And August 19th is the 10th day of the 5th month. So one of the things we can see here is that we have these symbols, the 5th day of the 4th month and the 10th day of the 5th month, that come from Ezekiel. And Ezekiel on the 5th day of the 4th month is predicting the destruction of Jerusalem, which occurs with the temple being destroyed on the 10th day of the 5th month, which is the main highlight of what Ezekiel is talking about. So the fact that we have these two dates lining up in this way, I don't think we could just, is that supposed to be the 10th day of the 5th month? I did something wrong here. Because that doesn't make sense. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, never mind. I'm looking at things backwards. Okay, so you can see the period of time from July 16th to August 19th. This is the 10th day, the 5th day of the 4th month, the 10th day of the 5th month. Now, the significance of this period of time comes from Ezekiel. So we have Josiah Litch's prophecy and the symbols from Ezekiel's prophecy tied together. Now, why were we predicting a nuclear attack on Nashville?
August 6th is the 26th day of the 4th month. And July 18 was also the 26th day of 4th month
Okay,
in the biblical calendar in the Gregorian date, I think.
yeah, and also on the Gregorian date of the 10th day, the 5th month was July 18th on the Julian date, right?
Yeah.
So Julian date of July 18th fell on the 10th day of the 5th month, and the Julian date and the Gregorian date of July 18th fell on the 26th day of the 4th month. So we had the symbols from just Ezekiel's prophecy and from Josiah Litch's prophecy, both showing us July 18th, both coming together, and also the symbols of the 391 and a half, and also the symbols of midnight and the midnight cry. So all of these symbols had come together in a very remarkable way, something that you couldn't really attribute to chance. That is its design, and very complex design, involved in looking at biblical prophecy and seeing these structures, such as Ezekiel's prophecy, and also Josiah Litch's prophecy. And Ezekiel's prophecy gives us the 666 years as well. So the fact that we had this symbol of 666 years in tying together the start of Josiah Litch's prophecy with the bombing of Hiroshima, and then the symbol of the 391.5 pointing to July 18th, and connecting July 18th to a nuclear attack. And then look what we were looking at in prophecy would seem to us the most likely scenario would be a nuclear attack on the United States. But we chose Nashville for the very reason Ellen White describes something that not only us, but many other people see as her describing a nuclear bomb or a nuclear explosion in Nashville. Some people interpret it as, a meteorite. Some people interpret it as a nuclear attack. There's a book, an Adventist book called The Great Visions of Ellen G. White. In there, when they look at her Nashville visions, they see it as a nuclear attack. So there was a belief that there was going to be a nuclear attack on Nashville. And there was lots of other reasons that came up that marked Nashville, having to do with its coordinates. I can't even remember everything. So lots of information, and this information kept piling up prior to July 18th. So we had all this information. Now, you can see I have September 11th here on this chart. What's the connection between September 11th, 2001 and July 18th, 2020? Okay.
Specifically, if I'm understanding the question, what we're comparing here is a turning point.
Okay, a turning point.
Well, September 11th, 2001 was a turning point because never before had there been an attack on American soil by a foreign entity.
What about the bombing of the World Trade Center on February 26th, 1993?
Was it successful?
Not to the extent that they wished it to be.
Right.
Yeah, so their plan was to take out the North Tower and make it fall into the South Tower. And it would have been successful if they had the van parked 30 meters over.
Okay.
And this is the testimony of one of the investigators of that bombing of the World Trade Center on February 26th. So, because they examined all the evidence, and it took, I believe, 5 floors of the parking garage. So it was
But as you just stated, it was not successful.
not successful, yeah. So, I mean, it did damage but it didn't catch as much attention as it would have if Waco hadn't happened 2 days later. So almost all the attention of the world was drawn away from this bombing of the World Trade Center because of Waco. And so we believe that there's a connection of those events. Now, you have here in front of you, and hopefully people can see it. It might be too small for some people on their devices. But what I did is I put September 11th, 1941 in here. And this doesn't have Hiroshima in it, though I probably could have put it in there. I just hadn't done that. But the interesting thing is I found is I put these dates, and these dates are September 11th, 1941, and the end of World War II of May 8th, 1945, which is a period of 1,335 days. And then I put October 31st, 2000. And anybody know why I put that there?
I think it's like 105 days after, what was it, November 9?
Is that the invasion of Afghanistan?
Well, I never had an event. So maybe it is. I don't know. I never actually even looked for an event. But if you look at it here, what's the number? How many days since September 11th, 1941? How many years is that? Or let's look at it that way. How many days is it?
You're showing 21,600.
Okay, so 21,600. What is that number? Stephen, what is the number 216 or around?
Yes. 6 times 6 times 600.
Okay, 6 times 6 times 600. Okay. Now notice September 11th, 2001. How many years is it from 1941 to 2001?
$60 years.
60 years, okay. Now, so those would be 60 years of 365 and a quarter days, correct?
Right.
But if I took 60 years, prophetic years, that would be 21600 days, 360 times 60 years. I'll zoom in so maybe some people can see this better. Okay, so if you look at that, you see what I'm doing here? Is I'm recognizing that this is 60 years, but I took 60 years in prophetic time. And this I got from looking at the Mayan calendar and different dates and how I looked at multiplying it by 360 or the actual number of years. So the difference between those is 315 days. So you can see that that's the difference. If I look at this chart, the difference between these two dates is 315 days. Now, then I put July 18th on here. Now this number here, the number of days from September 11th to July 18th, 2020 is how many days?
$28,800.
And what is that number?
14,400 times 2.
Okay, so 1/10 of 144,000 times 2. Now, it's kind of interesting too, when we look at this number in relationship to this number, it's 7,200 days more. What is 7,200?
It's half 14,400.
Yeah, It's also 360 times 20, correct?
Yes.
So the number of days, if we go back to September 11th, 1941, and we count 60 prophetic years, we would count another 20 prophetic years to get to July 18th, 2020. Can you see that?
That is 80 prophetic years, right? From 9/11, 1941 to July 18th, 2020.
Yeah, so this is pretty profound, isn't it? You know, one of the things I find interesting with all these dates, notice that they're either divisible by 5 or 10. See that? That means when you actually look at this entire chart, all of these numbers are divisible by 5 or 10 with these dates. Now, I have October 31st, 2020. And why do I have that date there? I had October 31st, 2000. So what is October 31st, 2020 doing?
Yes, 20 years later.
It's just 20 years later. So I have 20 years of literal years and 20 years of prophetic years, right? Pretty simple. But notice the number of difference of days between 20 prophetic years and 20 literal years. We have again this symbol of the 10th day of the 5th month. Now, of course, I added here also December 25th, 2021. Now, as far as its relationship, we know that its relationship to July 18th is 525 days. It's 420 days past October 31st, 20. So can we say this is significant by putting September 11th, 1941 into the mix? Does it give us a structure, a numeric structure that uses the symbols that we understand from biblical prophecy?
I would say it's interesting. I'm not too sure how significant it is.
Okay. Yeah. So what we could say, though, from it is that the September 11th, 1941 date shouldn't just be ignored. Could we say that?
No, it's worth looking at.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we're not making any predictions from it, but we can see that it connects prophetically to September 11th and also to July 18th, that it helps tie these two dates together. That would be, to me, the point of it, is that I can see that these two dates here are tied together. Does that make sense? That the 60 years and the 80 years since September 11th, 1941, that there's some connection symbolically to that date. You know, and this is the problem that we face in this movement. One is we have lots of information. We have lots of numbers. Not everybody really likes numbers. It is because they can't remember them, just like I can't remember names. So so when we look at them, we could think, well, these are just coincidences that occur. But it doesn't really mean anything. That we're just reading into it. We're seeing patterns. Humans' minds see patterns. We start to see patterns. We start to see numbers that are repeated. We think it's significant. But we already know some of these events are significant. And it is a nice analytical tool to look at a date like this. Now, Christian, what was the main reason that you saw this significance? What do you think it means that when you could connect 1335 days from September 11th, 1941 to May 8th, 1945?
So what I have seen is that there is a suggestion that the Second World War is a type of the final conflict.
Okay, right. And we can see that. We can see that, can't we?
Yeah. So given
even without this number.
Yeah, given the 1335 days, definitely we can see that.
Yeah, and then we can see in our history that September 11th is being prefigured in 1941, and so September 11th, 2001, it helps tie those together. The same way that we take the Battle of Plattsburgh or the Battle of Lake Champlain, whichever name you choose, in 1914. September 1914, or 1814, pardon me, not 1914, 1814, when William Miller experiences an event that leads to his conversion, that leads to him coming to understand and study the prophecies. And the fact that it's September 11th, we don't just take as a coincidence.
Yeah, and it's also the content. If you think about the Second World War, what happened over there? That was political power, Nazi Germany looking for global supremacy. And in this process, they were persecuting the Jewish people, right? The Holocaust, they were persecuting the Jewish people. So it's like a physical type of the final conflict, because during the final conflict, we have a spiritual power, the papacy persecuting spiritual Israel, right? So this is like a physical type, a physical type of the final conflict. So here everything plays politically. So there is a political power, Nazi Germany looking for world supremacy, and then persecuting physical Israel, the Jewish people, right?
Okay. Yeah, so I didn't catch everything you said. Find you hard to understand sometimes, but I think I get the gist of it. I mean, obviously, it's a type of what's going to happen.
It's a type of apocalypse, because if you take even people that don't understand biblical prophecy, they're not even Christians, if you're gonna ask somebody, a random person in the street, to name some events in recent history that are apocalyptic in nature, most probably they will mention some events that happened during the Second World War, because it was a really apocalyptic conflict. It has been fought on all continents, involving any major power, practically every major power in the world, with a tremendous destruction and tremendous loss of life. And it was really apocalyptic in nature.
Yeah.
You can see we find the symbols that connects it to the final conflict. So it's like a type of the final conflict. So if we want to understand how the final conflict is going to be like, then we have a political type,
Yeah. Yeah, and we also have even the role of the Adventist Church in the Second World War and the compromises made there, which we have paralleled already to what's happened with the vaccine. Right, so the church not supporting its members in their practice of their conscience of not to fight in a war. But that, and that's the other thing that it brings up in, because when we look at our history, even though the pandemic isn't as bad as the media makes it out to look, it is still a worldwide event that is connected with the suppression of the right of conscience. And that we can look at what's happening now also as a type of what's going to be happening. So a lot of these things can bring us back to things in the past and see how those things in the past parallel with the present. Any more comments about some of this?
So we can see that May 8th is a type. So if this is the type of the final conflict, then May 8th, 1945 is a type of the second coming, right? Because this is how this is the victory day, okay? This is how the final conflict is gonna end with the second coming. And then if that is a type of the second coming, then what is 9/11, 1941 a type of? This is an interesting question. What does it typify? What does 9/11, 1941 date typify?
Well, it definitely typifies 9/11, 2001.
Yeah, but I mean, during the final conflict, which event does it typify?
Well, I think that 9/11, at least in our line, would mark something similar to 9/11 in 1941. So, I mean, if you're wanting to put it into some future event other than 9/11, I'm not sure what particular event we would say that it typifies. I mean, it's definitely connected to 9/11, but is 9/11 typical of some future event? I mean, that's part of what we tried to address yesterday. The 9/11 is a waymark in our line. It's connected to the Sunday law. It's the beginning of the Sunday law, but it's not the Sunday law itself, even though we put some of the waymarks like Revelation 18 beginning at 9/11. So I think part of the problem that we have in trying to sort through this is we really have to be clear on what it is we're pointing to, what these future events are, and what these events that aren't on the big line, because they're not. World War I and World War II aren't on the big line, but they are prophetic symbols.
So there is one event that is being spoken of in prophecy. So Jesus speaks about it when he talks about the destruction of Jerusalem and about the end time. So we have those passages in Luke 21, Matthew 24, Mark 13. There is this abomination of desolation event. So that is still in the future. So I'm not exactly sure what you think about it.
Well, this would be the Sunday law.
Okay.
And the events connected to the Sunday law. I mean, the abomination of desolation we look at as being the Sunday law.
Okay. Because
I mean, that's part of the question. The question is, when we look at the coming Sunday law, here I'm going to read something. This is from my new paper that's not done yet. These are some statements that are quite interesting that I found regarding the Sunday law. And let's share the screen here. Okay, so Ellen White says, in the closing work of God in the earth, the standard of his law will be again exalted. False religion may prevail, iniquity may abound, and love of many wax cold. The cross of Calvary may be lost sight of, and darkness, like the pall of death, may spread over the world. the whole force of the popular current may be turned against the truth. Plot after plot may be formed to overthrow the people of God. But in the hour of greatest peril, the God of Elijah will raise up human instrumentalities to bear a message that will not be silenced. In the populous cities of the land and in the places where men have gone to the greatest lengths in speaking against the Most High, the voice of stern rebuke will be heard. Boldly will men of God's appointment denounce the union of the church with the world. Earnestly will they call upon men and women to turn from the observance of a man-made institution to the observance of the true Sabbath. Fear God and give glory to him, they will proclaim to every nation, for the hour of his judgment is come. And worship him that made heaven and earth, the sea and the fountains of waters, etc. Now, there's a number of things here. Can we see what she is describing is pretty much like what we see happening today?
Certainly.
Yes. And plot after plot to overthrow God's people. I mean, we can look at that as the church, but we can also look at it as this movement. In a time when the whole force of the popular current may be turned against the truth. Satan is trying to overthrow God's people. He's trying to destroy this message, this movement. Now, this next, and that's from just Prophets and Kings 186. The next one's Counsels in Health 520. This, the proclamation of the Sabbath, is our work. The light we have upon the third angel's message is the true light. The mark of the beast is exactly what it has been proclaimed to be. Not all in regard to this matter is yet understood and will not be understood until the unrolling of the scroll. But a most solemn work is to be accomplished in our world. The Lord's command to his servants, cry loud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgression and the house of Jacob their sins, Isaiah 58:1. A message that will arouse the churches is to be proclaimed. Every effort is to be made to give the light, not only to our people, but to the world. I've been instructed that the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation should be printed in small books with the necessary explanations and should be sent all over the world. Our people need to have the light placed before them in clearer lines. Now, there's a number of things here. So when she says not all in regard to the matter is yet understood, do we yet understand all that's involved in the mark of the beast?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, we don't. Now, we do know that what we're experiencing right now is connected to the mark of the beast. Now, in this paper, I explore a little bit about, some of the things that non-Adventists are saying about the pandemic that we've kind of adopted in this movement, such as luciferase and 666 milliliters dissolving this luciferase and making it into luciferin or whatever you want to call it, and some of these types of things. But we do know that we don't understand everything. And we are being drawn into this conflict, and Satan is doing everything he can to destroy God's people. He's got plot after plot. And yet we don't fully understand everything. Now, the scroll that's being unrolled, this is the scroll in the hand of the one seated upon the throne in Revelation chapter 5, that's going to be unsealed by the line of the tribe of Judah, pictured as a lamb slain with 7 horns and 7 eyes. So we know that it's this scroll, and that scroll is, of course, the prophecies of Daniel and their connection with Revelation, the message in regard to the little book. That's what this movement is all about. If we really wanted to say it in a nutshell, I mean, we can say that this movement is about the little book of Revelation chapter 10, the message of the 7 thunders, and the unsealing of the 7 thunders, which is part of the unrolling of this scroll. So when it comes to the Sunday law, should this movement be understanding correctly what the message is and what the Sunday law is about.
I would hope so.
I would hope so. Now we know that the Sabbath needs to be proclaimed, and also warnings regarding worshiping the beast and his image. And definitely we would be wrong to sort of ignore what's happening today in regarding to freedom of conscience, that it's being taken away. But also our message is not a political one. So some people get caught up in the politics of it. I'm not saying everyone is. But our message has to be clear. We have to be able to give the trumpet a certain sound. We can't have a mixture of truth and error. We need to know that we are proclaiming this message that Ellen White says we are to proclaim. The mark of the beast is exactly what it has been proclaimed to be, Ellen White says, but yet we don't understand all in regard to this matter. And this understanding is happening with the unrolling of the scroll. Is this movement unrolling this scroll? And how do we unroll the scroll if we are? Can we ignore anything that has happened in this movement?
Well, I would say that Christ unrolls the scroll.
Okay, so Christ unrolls the scroll. I would agree with that. We're involved in it though, right? Because we're repeating history. Because Christ unrolled the scroll in Millerite history, and he's unrolling the scroll now in this history. He's unsealing the seven seals, in a sense, as he unseals the seven thunders. That is, I look at the seven thunders as connected to the seven seals. The book of Daniel was sealed up, but there's a portion of the book of Daniel that still remained sealed. And it's that history of the Millerite movement, which was then sealed and now has been unsealed in our movement. Now, if we want to understand the Sunday law and the message we have to give, we have to really clearly understand our history. I mean, that's what we're doing right now, examining the foundation. And we have to be sure about what it is we're saying and what it is we're teaching. It can't be a mixture of truth and error. It has to be truth. And we have to be united upon it. And I think what we have right now is a mixture of truth with some error. And we have to be really careful on how we address this error. One is we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. We can't reject truth just because it's mixed with some error. And that would be the natural tendency of man.
So coming back to the abomination of desolation event.
Yeah.
So basically, this event has several applications, and there are two primary applications in Jewish history: the destruction of the temple, Jerusalem under the temple by the Babylonians, and then by the Romans. So these are two applications in Jewish history.
And they become a type of the end of the world.
Yes. And then there are applications in Christian history as well. So what are those applications? I'm not sure we are aware of those applications in Christian history, and they are connected with the Josiah Leach's timeline, because one of those points on Josiah Leach's timeline represents the abomination of desolation.
Okay, which point?
It is the 1453 fall of Constantinople. I think this represents the abomination of desolation in Christian history.
Okay. Yeah, so you brought up this before.
Yes.
So I know it's something that's a focus of your thinking. And I spent some time looking at what you were talking about before. Now, we have a number of events, even prior to that. We have Constantinople was taken over, for instance, by the Latins.
In 1204, yeah. This is marked in the book of Daniel. So in Daniel chapter 11, this event is being described as the abomination of desolation. So this is 1204, but on Josiah Leach's timeline, there is 1453. So I think.
Yeah, see, I know, I understand what you're saying. I don't know if I necessarily agree how you interpret 1453, because you try to argue that's actually the true event that Lich is really talking about. But I don't think that it is. I mean, it's connected to it by those 4 years. And so we have the 4 years also in connection at the end from August 11th, 1840 to October 22nd, 1844. But we'd have to look at this more. I'm not like dismissing it. I'm just saying, now you were saying something about Daniel chapter 11 has.
Yes, abomination of desolation appears in Daniel chapter 11.
Where?
Just a moment, please. I'm gonna look it up. In connection with the Crusades. So, and of course, it was connected. So I think it refers to the 1204 sack of Constantinople by the Crusaders.
Because I've never seen that in chapter 11.
Yes, it is that. One moment, please.
Okay. Because that would be a different, because I've studied through Daniel chapter 11, never ran across Constantinople in connection with the Crusades. So that would be a different interpretation.
Yes, Daniel chapter 11, verse 31.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't take that way. So, I mean, we haven't interpreted that as connected with Constantinople. We've done that in connection with Rome. Now, if you're, but we could look at that another time. I don't mind looking at it. Because maybe there's something we've missed. Says my internet connection is unstable. Hopefully it stays working. So how do you interpret that verse? We just got a few minutes here. Can you just give me a quick explanation of how you see this is connected with Constantinople?
Well, so here, this part of Daniel 11 describes the Crusades, right?
But based on what? I mean, we've never applied it to the Crusades.
Well, this is the classical standard interpretation. There are actually two interpretations for Daniel 11 in Adventist theology.
With how recent? Because I've never seen this applied to the Crusades, and I've read a great deal on different interpretations of Daniel 11, verse 31. The understanding we have of this is talking about the rise of the papacy, that the abomination that makes, because it's the taking away of the daily.
Yes.
In 508 and the setting up of the abomination that maketh desolate in 538. Now you're trying to apply this to the Crusades, and I've never heard that interpretation.
So during the Crusades, because it's
your view of the daily.
Is this conflict between the King of the North and King of the South, right? So this is what happened during the Crusade. It was the Fourth Crusade or Fifth Crusade. Okay, when Constantinople was sacked by the Crusaders in 1204. So there was a defeat, against the Arabs, and then they turned against Constantinople and they tried to.
Well, I understand that happened, but the question is, do you accept this as the daily being paganism, being taken out of the way, or do you have a new interpretation of the daily?
So the reason why
I'm asking you a question. Do you accept that this is referring to 508 and 538, that the taking away of the daily in Daniel 11:31 is the same as what we see in Daniel 12, verse 11. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate, there shall be 1,290 days. That is, if we accept that these are the same, it's talking about the same thing, and that the daily is paganism, how would you place this Daniel 11, verse 31, as having to do with Constantinople? Wouldn't you, do you accept the pioneer view of the daily? Is the simple question.
So the daily sacrifice, I don't think it is paganism. I think it is, okay.
Yeah, we would disagree with you
Yes.
because we've studied into it, and I'm not saying that just because we studied stuff that, you know, I'm some kind of papal authority and I can tell you you're wrong. But this is really foundational to this message, to this movement. If you take the position that the daily is not paganism, it destroys the 2520s, especially the one which the counterfeit one with the 21260s. And it does away with many of the statements. So we spent a great deal of time going through Ellen White's statements in early writings, page 74. So showing how those statements were pieced together from different visions of hers and the context of those. So if you're going to have me say that this is something to do with the Crusades and the daily isn't paganism, that it's something else, Christ's heavenly ministry or something, I would have a hard time accepting that.
I think it is Christ's heavenly ministry. I mean,
Well, it's not Christ's heavenly ministry. I mean, that's pretty clear.
okay.
The daily can't possibly be Christ's heavenly ministry. So that's the new view of the daily that Ellen White says comes from Satan. So I wouldn't accept that view.
Okay, so what is that abomination that makes desolate? Because that's
That's the papacy.
the papacy. Okay.
Yeah. So this is pagan and papal Rome. There's the two desolating powers. This is standard Millerite understanding. You have the two desolating powers, paganism, which we understand now in this movement goes from 723 to 538,
Yeah.
1260 years. It's a counterfeit of the earthly sanctuary. And papalism, it goes from 538 to 1798, and it's a counterfeit of Christ's ministry in the heavenly sanctuary. So paganism and papalism have their own counterfeit 2520 divided into two 1260s, just like the week of Christ, the 7 years, the 2520 divided into two 1260s. So if you're going to try to say that the daily is Christ's heavenly ministry,
Yeah.
you're not going to go very far with this movement, because we're pretty adamant about it. And I don't see that we could just reinterpret Daniel chapter 11 to try to fit in Constantinople. So just from my perspective, I think you're off track on this point. And it's something you need to consider. So I would suggest watching some of our other videos that we've done on it. And also read, have you looked at the paper on in my academia site called the Three Angels Messages Source Book?
No.
Okay, so what you can do is just type in, Theodore Turner, Three Angels Messages Source Book. It'll bring you to academia. And there's a chapter in that book dealing with the daily. So you can read the pioneer view, and also what Robert Wieland documents extremely well how the new view of the daily came in. So it may not be something you're very familiar with, but it's something you should look at. Okay, so I appreciate that. I'm not, trying to cut you off or anything, but we do have to close with prayer. And I have a couple of things that just I want to address afterwards. So let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are so very thankful for the study here this morning. We know, Lord, that the things that we are studying are very important. And we know, Lord, that the greatest hindrance to the truth is our unwillingness to accept it. We ask, Lord, that you can work upon our hearts, that you can clear our minds, that you can help us to humble ourselves before you and accept the light that you have given us, even if it shows that we are sinners separated from you. Forgive us for our sins. Help us to walk in the light, to take the steps each day that are placed before us. Be with us now throughout this day. Bring us again to study your word, if it is according to thy will. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.